Welcome back to CBS Sports HQ, where we're gearing up for a crucial contest tonight on Monday Night Football to wrap up Week 14 of the NFL schedule. The Dallas Cowboys host the Cincinnati Bengals. 8:15 kickoff from AT&T Stadium. Both teams barely alive in this playoff hunt. Let's get into it as we welcome you back to our CBS Sports HQ studios. I'm Jordan Giorgio alongside Jacqueline D'Agostino. We got Mike Renner and Leger Douzable in the house as well. Guys, Dallas has picked up back-to-back wins over division foes in the Commanders and the Giants. Cincy on a 3-game losing streak. Dallas still alive, barely breathing. Mathematically, they're still in this NFC playoff race, but do they hold on, Mike?
No.
No.
We talked about like the Dolphins last segment. It's just like even less about the Dallas Cowboys. They're so far back too. They're, 3 games back in the divisional, or to get to a wild card spot. And yeah, they beat the Commanders, but like that seemed pretty fluky at the time. Bengals tonight, I just don't think it's going to happen.
Question mark over there from Leger?
I will say this, and Pete Prisco said this last week. He was like, they're still in, and I'm like, they have no chance. The way this Cowboys team is played now, all right, you have to put an asterisk because they did play the Giants last week, right? But the Commanders win was a really good win. I think when you break down this team, right, they've been injured more than anybody, right? Dak Prescott is out, but Micah Parsons, since he's come back, that defenses look like a totally different defense. Also, DeRon Bland coming back. And you know this, Mike, when you have a new defensive coordinator in Mike Zimmer, it takes a while for everybody to mesh well and build that continuity. DeMario Overshown has played like a Pro Bowl player at the linebacker position. Just what a freakish athletic play last week to tip the ball up to himself and get an interception. I think this defense will keep them interesting down the stretch. Like, I think this is going to be a real interesting game because, and we'll talk about the Bengals later, but when you look at them, when they've had to play really good defenses, they've kind of struggled. When you look at that Eagles game, you look at Pittsburgh last week, and I know the score won't be indicative of, it being a close game because it was 41-24 late in the fourth quarter, and the Bengals ended up scoring twice in their last 2 drives. But that was a butt whipping by the Pittsburgh Steelers. So this Cowboys defense, I think, will keep them interesting, and I really love how they've used Rico Dowdle the last 2 weeks, right? When you look at the Commanders game, 19 carries. Look at last week, 22 carries. He's averaged over 4.5 yards per carry. He's actually provided some juice, and it finally feels right that they're using him as a true number 1 back because he is their best back that they have.
Yeah. Dak Prescott getting hurt made McCarthy actually have to scheme up a run game.
Yeah.
You need to actually try to run the football because before that they weren't even trying.
Yeah.
Let's talk more about Mike McCarthy because, of course, he has been on the hot seat, the warm seat, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. It's interesting now because now that they've rattled off 2 straight wins, we're kind of thinking like, is he going to be back? Is he not? Micah Parsons, who we just spoke about, saying that he wants Mike McCarthy to be back, which is all great and dandy. But Leger, how much does their success down the stretch here depend, or I guess his job depend on that? Because at first we're like, sounding the alarms, it's time to go. But now that they're kind of coming into form, maybe he stays? Question mark? I don't know.
Well, Mike knows I was one of the biggest Mike McCarthy fans. I thought it was asinine that people were saying he was coaching for his job this year. When you look at before this season, 3 straight seasons, 36 wins. Only 1 coach had more wins than that in the regular season. That was Big Red. That's Andy Reid, the best coach in the NFL. So you're telling me you have a guy that consistently wins you games, and you're talking about moving on? Just remember, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. The reason why the Cowboys are struggling this year, it's not Mike McCarthy's fault. It's Jerry Jones' fault because he decided to pay his 2 highest profile players late, which means they got more money because they gained more leverage, which means you couldn't bring other pieces in to help fill out this roster. And now we're seeing the issues with it with Dak Prescott going down. Now they don't have the subsequent talent on the roster to make a run. Now they've played really well these last 2 weeks, and we'll see them tonight versus a very explosive Bengals offense. But I think it's crazy that they're talking about Mike McCarthy not being back. When Dak Prescott signed that deal, Mike McCarthy should have been signing that deal because the grass isn't always greener on the other side. Let's not forget what they had before Mike McCarthy got there. It was playoff, out of playoffs, playoff, out of playoffs. 3 straight years in the playoffs with Mike McCarthy as head coach.
Yeah, I do think, though, he will not be the coach at the end of the season, even whatever Micah Parsons says, because what else is he going to say at this point? I want him fired? I don't think that's going to be the case. So I do think...
Right on his podcast, he says some crazy stuff on there.
He does say some crazy stuff on his podcast. But I will say that I just don't think it's been good enough if you're a Dallas Cowboys fan. And when you can get, with that brand, you could get a Bill Belichick, you can get a Mike, you can get the top-of-the-line guy.
Bill Belichick? That is not going to... You're not going to win games.
I can't imagine Bill and Jerry Jones.
That was
exactly. That's not going to mess well. And then it's just like Bill Belichick's coaching style isn't conducive to the current NFL state, which, again, this is another conversation with the UNC thing. If you are not relatable to NFL guys, how are you going to be relatable to college guys? And this is not me throwing stones at Bill Belichick, but Jerry Jones and Bill Belichick would never work.
I completely agree with that. What a world that would be. Okay, let's get to the Bengals now. We mentioned off the top, 3-game losing streak. They're 4-0 on the season. Not how we expected this season to go for the Bengals in this when we discussed in the offseason. What went wrong with Cincinnati this year, Mike?
They drafted bad players for like 3 straight drafts. Ever since Jamar Chase in 2021, their drafts have been almost zeros, and especially on the defensive side of the ball, because that's where they've been focused. Because you go back to the Super Bowl year, they had so much that defense was built via free agency. And I think a lot of great defenses built via free agency are not built to last. You know, the 2016 Jaguars found that out the hard way. When you pay a lot of money up front, you're going to have to pay on the back end too, and eventually that cap space runs out. And so they're running into that problem where they're trying to backfill with a bunch of young guys who just aren't good players, unfortunately. They did not draft well since then. And that's how you get the worst or one of the worst defenses in the NFL. A lot of guys mismatched for Lou Anarumo's scheme. Their identification of talent versus what they want for that scheme just hasn't been good enough, and that's how you get one of the best offenses in the NFL sitting here at 4-8.
Yeah, without a doubt, defense, number one, is the reason why they've been abysmal this year. And I think it's always interesting how the goalpost gets moved for defensive coaches when their offense isn't playing well, but yet for offensive coaches when their defense isn't playing well, they're not under the same fire, right? Mike, you hit on it, right? They've been really bad in the draft, especially along the defensive line as far as their draft picks the last few years. They really haven't developed and become really good starters. And then when you talk about it, even in free agency, they've missed, right? Geno Stone was a guy that led the Ravens in interceptions last year. He's been a shell of himself. Von Bell hasn't been as good either. Cam Taylor-Britt, which was actually a really good draft pick, he's regressed mightily this year. So, like, they've really struggled on the defensive side. And another issue that they have is with the ownership, right? I'm going to go ahead and say this. When you have frontline foundational pieces, you pay them, right? What they're doing with Jamar Chase is criminal. And now it's going to cost them even more because he leads the league in receiving yards, so he's going to want even a bigger buy. Trey Hendrickson, this was the best player on your defense, and you decided not to give him an extension. What does he go out and do? He leads the league in sacks right now. Matter of fact, he has 51% of their sacks, which is a ridiculous number, which means he's the only guy on that defense that anybody respects, right? If you stop Trey Hendrickson, you're going to have a lot of success on that Bengals defense. So when you talk about how they've struggled in the draft, right, their defense has struggled as well. They've also missed in free agency, and they haven't taken care of their own homegrown players. That's why they're in this mess right now.
Yeah, when your 3 best players outside of Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Trey Hendrickson, all want new contracts, and you're saying, I don't want to give them to you, how do you show up to work every single day in that locker room and come with a happy face and give your best if you're those guys and lead from the top? You just aren't going to be able to because you're not happy to be there day in and day out. And I think that's how you see the bottom falling out in the Bengals the way it has.
So you guys are both on the same page that the reason this is happening is because how they've drafted the past 3 years. Right now, heading into tonight's game, Monday Night Football, they hold the 10th overall pick in the upcoming NFL draft. What do you want to see them do with it?
I mean, it depends. If T. Higgins is gone, they're probably going to need a playmaker on the outside, but they have to get a blue chip player on defense. And me and Mike had this conversation yesterday. I don't know after Abdul Carter if they're going to have to be able to have a chance to pick a blue chip player, right? Even like a guy like Mason Graham most likely will be gone by the number 10 pick. So they got to get a blue chip player, whether it's on the outside to go with Jamar Chase or on the defensive line to get after the quarterback.
Yeah, D-line's the one strength of this draft. If there is one, that's where I'd go if I were them.
We know the Bengals organization. They've always been very conservative when it comes to money. Let's get a game pick. Bengals, 5.5-point road favorites, which is kind of crazy that I'm saying that, but that is the reality. Leger, what is the pick?
I'm going with the Cowboys to cover now. I know everything points in the opposite direction. The Cowboys have been abysmal at home. I believe they're 1-5, and that one win versus the Giants, and they're 0-4 as underdogs. But I love how this defense has played the last few weeks. I think they keep this game close. Give me the Cowboys plus 5.5.
And give me the Bengals. I think the Cowboys defense, smoke and mirrors the past few weeks. I think the Bengals offense, no one's stopping this Bengals.
All right, quickly, we got to get a same game parlay. You're our first leg. Leger, you're up.
I'm going to go Rico Dotto anytime touchdown. When you look at this Bengals defense, we just kind of smeared it and talked about it, right? They've given up a rushing touchdown to the starting running back in 4 straight weeks. Give me Rico Dotto anytime touchdown.
I'm going to go with the over. Very simple, but the Bengals, only the Ravens have gone over in more games this season. That's because they played more games this season. Give me the over.
All right. I like Jamar Chase with the yards tonight, but I'm going with a T. Higgins anytime touchdown.
Okay. I'm going to go Joe Burrow over his passing yards, 270.5. Whether they win or lose, he throws a lot. So I'm just going to go with that. Let's look at our same game parlay. The odds plus 6. 647. I mean, pretty good value in my opinion.
Oh, yeah.
T. Higgins anytime touchdown. Burrow over his passing yards. Rico Dowdle anytime touchdown. And Mike is going with the over. Plus 647 on FanDuel. And FanDuel, by the way, your go-to for all NFL action, because right now, all customers get a profit boost for every NFL game day. Plus, new customers can bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if you win. Make sure you download the FanDuel app and you can get started today.